My guest today has an amazing story. He was abandoned as an infant and discovered in a garbage container in Korea. He was rescued, thank God, and adopted out. And that's why he says it doesn't matter how you start out in life. God has a good plan for you.
Stay tuned. Bridges starts now.
I want to welcome you to Bridges today. I'm Monica Schmelter, and I'm glad that you could join us. My guest today on Bridges is Kim Deardoff. Did I say that right? Deardoff.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, wonderful. I want to welcome you.
Thank you so much.
Now, when I first met you and I heard about your story, just about your start in life, that somebody found you as a baby in a garbage dumpster.
Yeah, that's right. It's an incredible thing for me to think about that God could see me in that situation, that vulnerable situation. It's made a tremendous impact on my life to always realize how much God cares and loves me, loves everyone, mm-hmm. but that He could find me in that situation.
Yeah. Well, because you used exactly the right word, vulnerable. I mean, you know, as a baby, you're so helpless and so defenseless, and yet someone finds you, and that becomes, you know, your initial rescue. Who found you?
It's really unclear.
Mm-hmm.
The orphanage people told my parents that somebody discovered me in the trash can, and they brought me to the orphanage. So I don't really know.
Right.
Yeah.
So then you were adopted out. How old were you when you got adopted out, Kim?
Well, I spent 4 months, the first 4 months of my life at the orphanage, and they actually thought that I might be blind because I had something wrong with my eyes. Mm-hmm. I spent the first few weeks in the hospital, and they had a situation back then. They were just starting international adoptions. Mm-hmm. Korea was the first one, and the Holt family were the first family to initiate or to have legislated international adoptions. And so they would send these picture books around to families in America, and my picture happened to be in one of those books. Mm.
So a family then in America sees your picture, and then do they pick you? Is that what happened? Or?
Yeah, they picked me. They also picked a girl that became my sister. And the amazing thing is, at that particular time, NBC was doing a news story on the Holts, mm-hmm. and the founders of the orphanage, and they happened to be shooting their story on my parents' flight to Korea. Mm. So I have it all on film. While they were shooting the story about the Holts that week, the founder of the orphanage dies of a heart attack.
That week?
That same week. And so it's all on film, and I was, able to be one of the few people to be at the funeral to see him for the last time.
Oh my goodness. And I would imagine that for the children in the orphanage, that had to be such a loss, that someone who has helped rescue the lives of children to pass away like that.
It was a tremendous loss. This family had a very successful business in Oregon, and they had given it all up. They had adopted 8 children from Korea themselves, and they carried the weight and the mission of saving kids. Mm-hmm. And so it was a tremendous loss.
Mm-hmm. And the whole mission, of saving children is so important to the heart of God. God makes it very clear that He cares, for the fatherless. He cares for the orphans. And so, for people that do that kind of work, that's a really unique calling and vocation. So he passes away, Mr. Holt passes away that week, and you go with your mom and dad and your newly adopted sister also.
That's right.
And so now you have a family.
I have a family. They lived in Michigan, so they lived out in the middle of Michigan, out in the middle of nowhere, mm-hmm. really. And things seemed to be fine for a while, but unfortunately, my childhood was a very troubled. It was somewhat abusive, and I've kind of felt like I had no one to turn to, but to realize that God still loved me no matter what.
And you know, when I hear you say that, I mean, because Kim, what we think is that, you know, first to be abandoned, to be discovered in a garbage dumpster in Korea.
Yeah.
You know, we see in that story the miraculous intervention of God. Despite the abandonment, we see that God has someone to find you. We don't know who that is. And you go to the Holtz orphanage and you're there. And then a mom and a dad pick you and a sister. And I think just to travel from Korea to Midland, Michigan area, and then for that not to be a happy childhood. That's so sad.
It was really hard for me to understand as a child. I've later grown to realize that every person's damaged. You know, every person has the effects of sin. Every person has their own hurts and pains and insecurities and so, you know, I know they probably tried to do the best they could. Unfortunately, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a nurturing, it wasn't affirming, it wasn't a positive experience for me. But again, I realized that, you know, life is difficult. We live with the disease of sin.
We do.
And so, you know, I thank God for them.
Amen.
I thank God for them. They divorced when I was 14, and so
that had to be another tragic loss for you.
It was very difficult. It was highly difficult because my dad went to live in a hotel room. My mom, you know, had another boyfriend, and I was basically unwanted again at the age of 14.
You know, that's a lot of it's a lot of rejection.
Yeah.
For a child. I mean, it's hard for anybody, but the younger that we are when things happen, the less resources and the less life experience that we bring to it to handle it. But what I found, I guess, intriguing and inspiring and miraculous was that despite all of that and the questions that it leaves you with and the heartbreak and all of that, you were able to come to a place to understand that God really loved you anyway.
It's been quite a tremendous blessing. Number one, to realize that that I will never be in a more vulnerable place than I was when I was found. And for some reason, I've always just had the joy of the Lord in my life. I've always had a sense of His presence. I've always had a sense of His hand guiding my life. And despite all the rejection, I still have joy.
Amen. And you're not saying that you didn't hurt when you were a child.
Oh, tremendously.
That it wasn't tough.
I mean, I cried myself. You know, I cried every night. You know, as I went to sleep because I felt like I didn't really belong anywhere, and I tried to figure out. You know, what was happening? You know, how was God, you know, helping me in that situation?
Because a lot of people would ask that, Kim. I mean, a lot of people even hearing your story and they know what they go through, and they would think, well, no, God didn't help you. I mean, you got put in the garbage dumpster, and then you go to this family, and a lot of people are not able to see, you know, the intervention of God and the miraculous ways that He rescues us, or to see that they still have value despite the things that sinful people like we all are do.
Yeah. Well, you know, I grew up in a home that didn't have TV. We didn't have radio. We didn't have a lot
You didn't have TV or radio?
We didn't have TV. We had a radio, but we weren't allowed to only listen to certain things. It was very, very confined. It was
yeah, so you were like really in a box.
Yeah, it was
really sheltered.
Really strict. And so I wasn't exposed to a lot of external things. And so I would spend a lot of time by myself. I spent a lot of time working. I spent a lot of time outside. I spent a lot of time with my dog. I spent a lot of time contemplating and I guess communicating with God in the only way I knew how.
Yeah. Did you ever question like why God even allowed you to be born?
No,
No.
I really never questioned that.
Did
I
you ever
often-
feel angry at God?
I never felt angry at God.
That's good. That's
I
good.
never. I had major
You
questions.
did. Did you wonder like why you were here on earth?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one. I think everybody asks that question.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to know why they're here and what they're here for.
And I think one of the things that we say so many times, Kim, when it comes to children is, the ideal situation, of course, is that every child, is a wanted child and is in an affirming, nurturing environment. But in a sense, when I hear you talk and you're saying, even though those things weren't there for you, and we certainly wish that they would have been, that you've still been able to come to a place that life is worth living, and you even went on that really large tour, is it with Winter Jam? And spoke to thousands and thousands of people about your story and the value of adoption.
That's true. I don't think negatively about it. I think only positive about it because I know what I've gone through. I know what I've been through. I know all the pain that I've experienced. And then I know all the redemptive things that God has done in my life and where He's brought me and taken me to impossible situations and allowed me to be successful. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the only way anybody finds value in life is understanding who they are in relationship to Christ.
And how did you find Christ? The family that adopted you, did they teach you about Him, or?
It was very religious. It was very legalistic. So I learned about, the gospel at an early age, but it didn't really sink in until I left home. And I was
Okay.
about 20 years old.
So it was a religious home.
Very religious.
And it sounds like maybe they were just really strict and legalistic. They were probably trying to do the right thing.
They were trying to do the right thing.
It just wasn't.
Best they could.
And that's what all parents do. I mean, it just wasn't very affirming, but you heard the gospel.
Absolutely.
You did.
Yeah.
Did you accept Christ at that time as a child?
I did accept Christ, and I felt like I thought I understood what it was all about, but I didn't really have a true understanding until I was a little older.
Yeah. Well, especially, if you were raised in a legalistic, you only know what you're raised in, and that's what you thought it was.
Yeah.
Was just being really strict and being sequestered from TV and not being allowed to put the radio on and those things. That was your impression.
Yeah.
And you're saying that as you grew up, you found out it's really about more than that.
Yeah, it's about allowing God's Spirit to live inside you. It's realizing what Christ did for us on the cross. It grows a lot more deeply as life goes on.
It does, and it's got to really come to that place that it's personal for us. We've got to take a break. We want you to stay with us. When we come back, we're going to hear more about Kim's story and some of the remarkable things and opportunities that God has given him, the opportunity to be involved in, and the skills and the gifts that He's allowed him to cultivate and to develop despite his very rough beginning.
For information on today's guest, visit our website, ctntv.org.
If you would like to order a copy of today's Bridges episode, call 615-754-0039. Be sure to mention the program number on your screen.
Log on to www.ctntv.org, where you can make a prayer request, view our program guide, see who's on Bridges, or even watch one of Monica's latest teachings. Log on to www.ctntv.org.
Life's not always perfect. If you need prayer, write to the address on your screen or call 615-754-0039 or email prayer@ctntv.org.
If you're just joining us today on Bridges, I'm talking to a young man who has an amazing story about how he was rejected and abandoned at birth and then adopted out And then that family wasn't the most nurturing and affirming environment. However, he's been able to come to a place to really understand his value and his identity as being rooted and grounded in the person of Jesus Christ. And Kim, as we're talking, my prayer for people is that, everyone's story, or a lot of people's story, may not be as dramatic as yours, being abandoned to a garbage dumpster and just, left to die if you weren't rescued. But a lot of people feel rejected by their parents, or are in a home that's not positive and not affirming. And yet, God still loves them. Their life is worth something, even though the people in their life hasn't understood their value. How would you help somebody like that? What would you say?
I would encourage them. I'm not sure why my feelings were different as a child, because I know a lot of people that have been through negative experiences hold on to a negative view of God. I would just really encourage them to get to know who Christ is. Read the Word of God, and as they do that, as they spend more time getting to know who Christ is, they'll realize that their worth is exponential. Their worth is amazing. Yeah. That God can take and wants to take any individual and allow them to glorify Him.
Yeah. And I think, Kim, that sometimes that's what we can miss easily enough if we're not looking for it, is to kind of accept the way that people relate to us, or accept the way that people respond or don't respond to us or reject us. And we can let that define, how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's really easy for a human being to get their affirmation from other human beings. Yeah. And that's where things start falling apart.
Yeah.
Because they're damaged and they're flawed at the same time. They don't have the ability to give you what you really need.
No, nobody does.
Yeah.
No, regardless of what a great person they are, or even if they're a strong leader or pastor or minister, nobody can give us what you're talking about, that our value has to come from who Christ is. And if we don't know Him for ourselves, even though you grew up in a family that read the Bible, that didn't give you a relationship with Christ.
Right, and the reason why nobody can give you that identity, and nobody can give you that fulfillment, and nobody can give you that a feeling of peace, they're not the Creator.
Yeah. And who can love us like the one who created us?
That's right.
And He knows what He created us for and how we can best glorify Him. And, even though you obviously had a really rough start and some difficult things that happened, God has, as I read on your website and in my conversation with you, He's given you some incredible gifts and opportunities, like with music, for example. And I'd love to hear about some of those things and how they were cultivated in your life, despite difficult circumstances.
Well, the one thing I found early on to help me through was the piano. And for some reason, we had this old beat-up piano, and I 3 years old, I started playing notes on the piano, and I listened to them resonate, and I just heard them ring, and for some reason, it was like magical to me. It gave me a sense of, it brought out my creativity. It gave me a connection with God, the Creator, and it took my mind into another place.
Did you take lessons, or were you just it was just a gift from God, or how did it happen?
I took lessons for a short time, but I was really, really young, and I didn't.
Yeah, because when you said 3, I'm thinking that's really.
I started taking lessons when I was 4, but it was terrible. I mean, I was terrible at lessons. I didn't like lessons. I liked learning by hearing. And by listening to other recordings. I didn't want to be structured and put in a box. And so I started learning by ear. I started writing when I was around 5. I started writing stuff.
You started writing stuff when you were 5 years old? Like, what were you writing? Like, what does that mean?
Just music, just melodies, just, things that I felt like I was hearing in my head. just spontaneous. I would spend hours, any extra hours I'd have, I'd spend at the piano, and I would just sit and create and just allow things to flow.
That's amazing. Now, did you know as a 5-year-old that was a unique and amazing sort of a gift, or did you just, it was just you?
I assumed everybody could do that.
Yeah.
I assumed everybody had that creative spark or whatever. And I never really wanted to learn the piano to be a performer. I really just wanted to be able to write.
Wow. So you're writing all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And God, throughout your life, he gives you some incredible opportunities to work with some things that people would just dream about doing.
Yeah. You know, my motto on my website is, it doesn't matter where or how you start out in life, that God has a purpose and a plan for everyone. And I believe that God did have a purpose and a plan for my life. I've been able to, I've lived in Texas, California, and Florida 5 years each. And when I was in California, I had an opportunity to play for Mickey Rooney's wife. I was her pianist for a few years. I have had a chance to, I got interested in audio production and music production, and when I was living in Orlando, Florida, I was hired to be the head sound design engineer for a top post-production house, and I was able to do projects for Walt Disney, and I did the exhibits for NASA at the Kennedy Space Center.
That's amazing. I mean, you're saying it like, you know, it's so easy, but those are opportunities, you know, that people pray and work for a whole lifetime.
And I prayed and worked for a long time also.
Yes.
And I have to stress by saying, having those opportunities, I was scared to death.
Sure.
Like anybody, I don't know about anybody else, but I had a lot of insecurities. I had a lot of low self-esteem, and it's taken me years to build that up. And I just want to let people know that whatever fear you're facing, if God calls you to do something, he's going to give you the ability to be successful.
Yes, but I think it's so important, Kim, that you say, you know, even when you use the term, you were scared to death, because sometimes people think that we come to faith in Christ.
Yeah.
And that, you know, whether it's writing stuff for the piano or working with Walt Disney or these other opportunities that you've had, that somehow that means that we're not afraid. And somehow that means that we're not insecure. But we're people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I do this program and I'm insecure and I'm scared and I make mistakes, and sometimes I think, oh, that was just the dumbest thing, why did I do that? But I keep on.
That's right. And I think a lot of times people go, well, you know, another major question people have is, how do I hear God's will for my life?
Yeah.
How do I know God's telling me to do that? Well, a lot of times I found out that God, when he instructs us to do something, he communicates something to us, he asks us to do something that addresses one of our greatest fears. And a lot of times he'll say, this is my will for your life. And you hear it and you go, no, I can't do that. I can't do that.
That's right.
I can't do that. And you pass it off enough times to where you can't really hear God's will for your life.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you just embrace what he instructs you to do, even though you feel like it's overwhelming and it's too much, and you allow God to work through that situation, and you realize that you've become successful, the more times you do that, the more times you hear God's voice.
Yes, because we gain in confidence in God.
That's right.
And in faith. And I think that, you know, God also, he's so good to us, Kim, that he gives it to us in little pieces. I mean, you didn't, on your first go-around, work for Walt Disney.
No, but I'll say I had 1 week of training on a professional audio software, and my first project was a $5 million film.
That's amazing.
So you know, I feel like God does give it to us in doses, but sometimes he asks us to make some pretty giant leaps.
And that's an important lesson for people, because if he gives us a lot to bite off, so to speak, then you're saying he's going to give us the grace, even if we're afraid to do those things.
The grace, the ability, the confidence, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. How did you work through those fears, or did you ever, like, do you ever feel fear now when you try something new, or
Always.
did you get to,
all the time? I mean, even working for the NRB network, this is not an area that I've spent years and years developing. It's not something that I would say is my forte or something that I feel 100% comfortable. But I felt like God was leading me into that area. Every time I speak, we spoke about my experience. I have a little movie I put up on YouTube, and I've had people write to me all over the world. And I had an opportunity. I got invited on a Christian concert tour that turned out to be the largest concert tour in the world.
Yes.
And I spoke to, I was invited to over 76 cities in 6 months, and I was able to speak to people on behalf of the orphanage that saved my life. And we raised over 5,000 sponsors for orphan children. Public speaking was certainly something that I wasn't comfortable with. So yeah, I think I address fears every day. I don't think I'll ever stop addressing fears.
Yeah, and I don't think that any of us will.
Yeah.
And I've heard some Christian believers say, and that I understand what they're trying to say about not walking in fear, and hopefully I don't walk in fear in my life, but I do experience fears. And every time I step up to speak or to minister or to do this program, I experience fear, on some level. It may not be the same amount as it was when I first started, but that battle of the flesh never stops.
Jesus battled it before he went to the cross. The night before he was arrested, 3 times he asked the Father to take the cup. It's not something that he wanted to go through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even Christ battled.
That's right, because we're struggling on this side of the equation.
Right.
With the flesh and with our sin nature and with the world and the world system and the devil. And someday all that weight will be lifted from us and we'll be like him.
That'll be amazing.
Yeah, I can't wait for that day. But until then, and what I like to encourage people in is that while planet Earth has scary things and scary people and scary stuff, we have that great big God who just really is in love with us.
He loves us. He made us. He doesn't want anyone to be lost. He created a perfect universe, and he wants us to be with him.
Yeah, he does. And we've got just a little bit of time left. I know that God gave you a beautiful wife not too long ago, and I'd love for you to share that. What is her name?
Her name is Sherry. She grew up in Kentucky. I met her at church, I guess a little over almost 2 years ago. I was 47 years old, so I've learned a lot about waiting.
Yeah.
Waiting on God, waiting in life, waiting for lots of things. I spent decades in a room by myself, just waiting. But he's given you a beautiful bride and a beautiful life. And I want to thank you so much for coming and for sharing today. Well, thank you, Monica. It's been a blessing. If you'd like to find out more information about today's show and today's guest, we would also invite you. You can go to our website at ctntv.org to learn more, check out our program schedule. We are so glad that you could join us today. We're out of time. We've got to go, but we say goodbye and God bless you.
If you would like to order a copy of today's Bridges episode, call 615-754-0039. Be sure to mention the program number on your screen.
Life's not always perfect. If you need prayer, write to the address on your screen or call 615-754-0039 or email prayer@ctntv.org.
Thanks for watching Bridges.